All right, I've got one question for Todd here before we get into it. I need to know who's in charge of analogies over there in Ace. Who's in charge of putting out the soccer team, the soccer season, the salad bar at the steakhouse?
Wait, do you like them or not like them?
I don't know.
Depends on who made them.
Yeah, those are mine. Actually, the forums I do better, if you can believe it, than I do in real life. Because in real life, I will change analogies in the middle of one.
Right. It's confusing.
Well, I mean, I know you had a little post earlier today about your analogies where you made a better one. It was you modified your soccer season one, I believe. You want to go into that one?
Yeah, it was because somebody pointed out, they're like, you know, I think actually Raph says it in the video, but it's an analogy we've been using for a while, which is, you know, that the individual campaign is like a soccer match and the Eternal Kingdom is like a season. And somebody's like, it's really not like a season. We're like, that's actually true. You're right. The tournaments are more like a season. It's more like, you know, say if the campaign is a rugby match, and the EK is more like the pub where you go get drunk between matches.
Right.
So that's actually a much better analogy.
The pub. It was more like my ranch dressing analogy last night that I threw out there, but I'll leave that to somebody else to explain. But let's get started here, guys. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dragon Valor, and Lake's here with me tonight. We're joined by the Crowfall team. We've got left to right Todd, Thomas, and Gordon all checking in. They just got fresh off the Golden Boys podcast over there, Golden Glory. They're about here to pull an all-nighter. What are we down to? 8 hours to go, I think. 7 hours to go.
Less than that.
Something like that.
Jason, I think our music's still on.
To figure that
I
out.
should probably pause that, right?
Yeah.
Right? 10
10
or
hours.
11.
10 hours.
10
7
hours.
tomorrow morning is when it's over.
10 hours to go.
Yeah, 10 Central is when it's over.
No. 7.
right.
7.
I'm sorry.
7.
I just totally lied. It's 7 o'clock Central.
See, that's
Don't try and put in a bid at 10.
Okay, there we go. Let's get down to the rundown real quick. We put down all the stats yesterday. We already hit the 1.6 million goal. We got tournaments live. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Right now, we do a shout out to Hitbox. We're going live both on Twitch and hitbox.tv. Lakes, you want to do a shout out to your buddy out there for hooking us up?
Yeah, Mike Chapman. I appreciate him, and he's doing good stuff over there. So if you guys haven't checked it out, make sure you check out Hitbox.
Excellent, very good. I think we got volume in the background here. Somebody have their stream running in the background? We're getting sound from somebody.
We're all looking around.
Never mind. Yeah. In any case, I want to talk about tournaments because I think before we get into some of the other stuff, I think that's an incredibly important aspect for your game because promoting your game is these days is really promoting it on Twitch and a lot of other esports channels. And while MMOs are very popular these days, they're not very popular on Twitch because it's very boring to watch somebody raid in an MMO, and often, you know, it's generally not just a fun thing to do. So, what plans do you have for tournaments to make it more of a larger audience, where gathering viewership, the whole esport aspect of thing, creating community? Do you have anything forethought into that before you start?
Yeah, well, tournaments have been a go for like at least 20 minutes. So by now we have
it all designed.
We have it all figured out.
Right.
No, you're totally your high level point is absolutely valid. It is really important. I don't think that we'll suffer for the same problem that the more PvE focused games have. I actually think that watching will be incredibly cool and very engaging. But we don't have an answer to that question yet because we haven't really had a chance.
Sure.
In fact, we've been in dev chats while that goal was hit. So we even haven't had a moment to talk about it, but we will come up with a solution for it because it's a must-have, I think.
Okay, I mean that's kind of what I want to lock you down on as far as the must-have aspect.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I mean, I stopped watching cable. I just watched Twitch streams all night, much to the annoyment of my wife.
You and me, brother.
You and all of us apparently.
I'll sit in bed. My wife is asleep. Instead of reading a book, I'm watching Twitch, and she's screaming at me if my headphones get unplugged. And all of a sudden, there's someone cursing their face off playing League of Legends or something like that. But it's good that the tournament thing. I'm very excited. I think I want to do a whole follow-up show about it. Probably, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months down the road when things are a little bit more fleshed out, and hopefully you have a little bit more for us so we can kind of talk about it because it's very important for a show
we
like
love
this. Because, I mean, we could talk about how great campaigns are, how great this, that, and the other is, and that kind of gets stale over a while. But if we have an active, living game that we can talk about on a weekly basis, because we want to be the ESPN to, you know, sports, just like your soccer analogy. So I think that's going to be a solid point moving forward.
The analogies restrain terror.
So
yeah, we talked about Twitch the next day, like what we watched the previous night. I mean, it really is the next form of entertainment for a lot of us.
Absolutely. And a couple of things I want to move on to. I mean, the Kickstarter has been a very long process for you guys. You guys been working on the game for, what you said, about a year now before the KS launched?
Gordon and I, it's been more like 2, but you know, so I mean, the core team, a year, 9 months, something like that for most people, I think. So
something like that. Okay, but like, so you've come a long way before your Kickstarter, and I think you guys learned a lot about the whole Kickstarting process over the last 30 days or 29 days and how many hours left. If you could go back to the end of February, what would you have done different as far as setting up your tiers and setting up your goals? Would you do anything different? Have you learned anything?
Yeah, so that first stretch goal that we did, we put it was a pretty far jump, right? We put a stretch goal out there that was $300,000. And that was actually, I guess that was the second one technically, right? It was 200 followed by 3.
Yep. Yeah.
So that was a really big jump to take so early. I mean, unfortunately, it's actually what we wanted to do, and it's actually what it cost. So, you know, I'd love to have a better answer for it. I don't know that I could have changed it, but I wish I could have, because as a result, it meant that we kind of had a gulf in the middle where it was kind of like, all right, we're just waiting for that thing to hit if it ever does. And then here, like at the end, it's like every 2 hours, Tully's walking in the office. He's like, "Hey, we hit another stretch goal." Actually, I mean, we hit 2.
Uh-oh.
We got it right. We got to thank everybody again.
Do stuff. Tournaments. Great idea.
Yeah.
Thank you, by the way.
We knew what we wanted. That was the thing. Is the stretch goals? They weren't. I think a lot of times the stretch goals are arranged specifically to go out and try and aggregate bigger audiences.
Sure.
And we didn't do that as much with ours. With ours, it was more like we presented, here's the overall vision. There's everything that we want to do. Here's the core module, because we can't realistically expect, if we set the target for way out here, we might get left with nothing because of the weird rules of Kickstarter.
Sure.
So we're going to promise this, and then as we trigger that, we're going to go ahead and promise more and more, which is a much more honest approach.
Yeah, but I think
and not the best sales approach, quite frankly.
No,
but
I think it's the perfect
sales
sales approach. I mean, there's a couple of us here that do sales and marketing for a living, and you know, you give small, measurable goals for people to hit, and they appreciate that. We don't. I mean, you're not looking to, you know, deliver, you know, My Little Pony Princess Castle for, you know, $10 million and hope people get there. I mean, it's you got mounts, you got caravans, you got different archetypes. I mean, it's small little progression. I think that gets people to.
And the backer goals were great, because the backer goals actually was a way that somebody could say, hey, if I could just get a friend or two to kick in a couple bucks, then I can get a really cool thing. Right? I think the backer goals helped immensely.
I've never seen that before. I thought that was a good idea. Next point.
You notice all of those were there. From a cost standpoint, though, all of those we tried to keep them as small as possible. Like, we already had artifacts, we already had this statue. Great, that's a relic now.
Boom, done. One point before we move on to some of the harder questions or the more defined things. There's a lot of players out there that don't really play MMOs anymore. I mean, probably starting maybe 3-4 years ago, the whole MMOs started becoming passé as everybody got bored of World of Warcraft, and the MOBA scene really took off. I mean, you can see that on Twitch already. What are you doing to bring in the MOBA crowd? I know my brother-in-law might be listening right now. He hates MMOs. He hates the whole quest treadmill type of deal and all that other stuff. What kind of elements or what kind of marketing are you putting into trying to get those kind of more twitchy players into the fold, if anything?
So far, we haven't really.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, they'll come. I think they'll come on their own over time. Our core market is really MMO players who want consequential gameplay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's
somebody who's breeze, you know, lives and breathes MOBAs, is going to say, "Wow, this is, you know, my instant gratification is not being scratched correctly."
Gotcha. Okay.
There'll be some, I think. I think there is a potential for crossover, but my guess is it'll have to happen organically because the game is awesome, and that's how. Like, I don't think we would go and drop an ad somewhere and say, "Hey, if you like," you know. Doesn't. You know, I think it'll happen naturally because some of them, the same thing will happen as happened with WoW. Some of them will get naturally bored because they're like, okay, I kind of know enough about this, I've done this enough, and I want something different. And then they'll start to look around, and then if a friend is playing this thing, they're like, oh, this is awesome.
The friend factor is the biggest one, right?
Oh, absolutely.
People play what their friends are playing. So if their friends are having a good time, and if they see somebody streaming something, I mean, again, you'd be like, hey, that looked interesting. I saw a centaur, and it knocked that guy across the screen.
That's
that
cool.
Looked really
Let's go
fun.
check it out.
Is that a hint?
Let's go check it out, right? So
I think you guys did a great job with this. Is you actually said already, you know, there's not going to be an NDA, and stream away is
That's
what I believe
guys,
Todd said. You know, and so I mean that's one of those things that I think a lot of us are excited for. I know Lake's done some shoutcasting stuff like that. Have you guys been able to dig into any of the streaming features that people might be able to cover some of maybe the shorter campaigns for? A shoutcasting type of show?
We haven't looked at it yet.
Right.
I mean, again, that's an area we're going to have to get into. The other piece of it is, and this is something that we did on Shadowbane, but actually was, I think, too early for the market, is outputting statistics, right? An API that basically is giving you a real-time look or glimpse, at the statistics of what's going on in the universe. I think that's going to become key for us too. But again, it was one of those things. It was like, well, technically, can we ship the game without it? We can. Okay, well then it's not core. We're going to have to put it on a stretch goal or something later. So we'll get to that. We'll figure it out. But
here's a perfect segue into the next point that I want to bring up. I want to talk about campaigns from a larger scale, because I mean, we have all these little things that we've heard from you guys: protecting mines, going out and gathering stuff from the mill, caravans, patrolling, territory control, that type of thing. But we don't know what happens on the day-to-day. I mean, people are like, okay, I logged in. What happens now? And, well, I mean, to the point of the Shadowbane stuff with the API, Lake's had a couple good points here where we want to bring players together and inform those communities, and he's big on the guild tools, and I think Lake's has a couple good points that he wants to bring up with that, so I'll let him do that.
Yeah, so overall, one of the biggest things that in MMOs is interaction, and that seems like one of the things you guys want to do as far as not even having auction houses you're going to have to buy from specific people. But as far as big guild management goes, what systems do you have in place for those big guild management? And is there any plans of having like out-of-game management, whether there's some kind of apps or anything like that with the new technology out there?
Yeah, so we will have to have the guild stuff exposed to the web, no question. It's just that's to me is a necessity. So the reason we haven't talked about guild first, okay, so let me make one point first. EK management and guild management are two different things. They're not. We didn't tie those together, and the reason for that is because we have specific design goals that we want out of the EK. To me, it is for us to come in and tell the guilds, hey, here's how way we've decided you need to manage your guild would be pretty arrogant, quite frankly. The guilds have existed long before us. In fact, they existed before Shadowbane. They will exist long after us.
Right?
So philosophically speaking, what we need to do is give the guilds the tools to manage, but we can't assume any kind of structure like, okay, well, you can have exactly 7 people in your inner council. Like that just doesn't work. So the reason that we haven't really talked about it is because we're going to go out and basically build a tool set that is flexible enough to let the guilds manage, and then we're going to just hand them to them. I don't expect that to be an area where we're going to try and shove anything particular down anybody's throats.
Right.
So therefore, it wasn't worth spending a lot of time talking about it because I don't expect it to be particularly provocative or debatable. Yeah. It's kind of like, all right, well, here's the way the guilds all work, so here's the management structure to let you do that. And we will show, here's where they tie in to the Eternal Kingdoms, because those will be tied together a lot of times. But even then, it's a link that the guilds get to choose whether to use or not. It's not anything that's preset.
And then I just have one more question as far as big guild management goes. Let's just say my guild finished a campaign and we're looking to join another campaign. Are we going to be able to see the progression of current campaigns going on before we join them?
Yes and no, but we haven't decided, so let me explain why I said that. Yes, we're going to show you some, but I don't want to say we're going to show you everything because we may have design reasons where we specifically decide to hide some elements because otherwise it could cause a slippery slope where we just don't get anyone to join this campaign because the behavior of the users causes them to say, hey, if you see this, it's a red flag, don't do it.
Because you guys are there.
Yeah, because blah, blah, is there.
Because Uncle Bob's there.
What's that?
Because Uncle Bob is there.
Right, exactly. So that's, we just, Ideally, yes. I mean, we certainly have to show you some information, right? It's not going to just be a click a button and we randomly drop you into a campaign. And the whole point of having the different campaign rules means that we have to at least expose the rule settings so that you can choose, or that your guild can choose. But that said, I'm not going to suggest that we're going to show everything, because everything may not be the right answer, right? Like, if, for example, if we have a three-way faction and on this particular Tuesday, this particular campaign, nobody is logged in from Chaos. Do we really want to show that? Because it could cause, I mean, we might not. I don't know. So we need to go through and talk about that. There's a lot of considerations there in terms of what we expose and what we don't when it comes to the campaigns, the active data relating to the campaigns.
Yeah, that actually brings up a good follow-up question. And one is, would you consider locking the entry into particular factions or whatever elements there are to campaigns? And have you guys thought already about a quick finish if somebody has already taken over a campaign, results are imminent, and people are already leaving that campaign because they know they're going to lose?
Yeah, we had talked about a either-or system where winter comes and the world ends and explodes, or if a series of objectives allowed an early out. Ideally, we don't have people bailing out of these things all the time, because then you lose everything in your embargo. We're kind of, from the design side, encouraging you not to just bail out of the campaigns when you're losing.
And actually, one of my favorite community-generated ideas that I've heard so far, I don't know that we'll do it, but I think it's hilarious, is the pay-to-lose idea, where if you want to bail out early, there's some fee, and it could be resources, or it could be gold, or it could be an actual...
Gordon likes that one.
You have to actually pay to bail out. It's a funny idea. Mostly I like the fact that it's called pay to lose. I think that's hilarious.
Well, I'm a consumer, and I don't object to that.
Should pay to lose.
They should pay to lose.
So,
I mean, there's tons of different ways to monetize this. There's a couple points I want to bring up about that later on the show, but I want to get back to the original part of the campaign. And can you envision, I mean, the gameplay for somebody in a large guild is completely different from somebody that's coming in by themselves or with a bunch of friends. Can you go over, how you might see somebody that only has a small group of people and not have the organization around them to direct them, how they're going to get through your game? Day 1 of the campaign, day 10, you log on. What do you do? Is there?
Yeah. So the answer is actually even more complicated than that, because the day 1 versus day 10 is a very different answer than day 30. Right? Is as the campaign progresses, just like a game of Civilization, the early part of the game, like the first couple rounds, is completely different than the end of the game. So the campaigns themselves will be changing. So I don't have an easy answer for you. Right? We can tell you the components that we're bringing to bear, but how any individual person will navigate through those components and their experience will weave between those different systems, I don't know. And that's part of the danger of this design, but it's also part of what makes it so cool, is that we're kind of letting go the reins to some degree on that. It's the opposite of what MMOs have been doing for the last 10 years, where the goal was to tighten down exactly their experience, so on a moment-by-moment basis exactly what they're doing and how much fun they're going to have. Like, you're parceling out, all right, it's a little bit more fun for you, move on to the next objective.
I also think the mental map that we've been presented is different. So people are thinking when they're dropping into a campaign, it's like dropping into a battleground. There's a closed gate. There's a little mini-map. You can hit the map to see what's going on. The gate opens. Everybody charges out to the objectives. We might drop you scattered into this campaign. Your first goal is going to be, hey, I need some stuff because there's monsters around there. I need some food. I need to link up with you guys so we can take over the ruins and start making our base there.
So you taking a page out of some of the survival games out there with some of the gameplay aspects earlier?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Right. So there will be that element, but I think the mental model that everyone has is it's not a battleground.
Right.
You may not have a mini map, and you may not see where everything is. Everything's fog of war. You have to scout out, and then you have to link up with the rest of your team. So it's like being dropped on a deserted island, series of islands. You got to link up so you can start building together.
All right, you guys are going to hate this question because I'm probably going to get an answer we don't know yet. But how about we talk about a little bit more high level, because we talk about survival. I think we need to talk about hunger, because it's the kind of the elephant in the room. I mean, you're talking about hunger, you're talking about winter and all this other stuff, but we don't know how hunger works. So let me go off and start by the last time I had a hunger and thirst mechanic was back in 1996 when I was playing Sojourn Mud and I was a teenager, and I got a "You are hungry, you are thirsty" message popping up on my screen, and I had a script to eat iron rations and drink water skin, and I was good to go. how does that affect gameplay, and how do you think you're going to combat those elements?
So okay, so first of all, hunger isn't hunger. Hunger is the I used that name for our narrative wrapper, right?
Right.
So hunger's not hunger. So instead we have warmth, and warmth is actually closer to hunger than warmth.
Right.
So,
Todd likes to mix his terms. We also have a god named hero,
Yeah.
and the players are heroes. So
I know.
this is
I'm
another
sorry.
one of those.
I know you have the hunger element with which creeps up on all the NPCs and everything else like that. But I did see all those kind of survival stats on there, and I kind of lumped that into like food and water type of stuff.
Yeah, but the survival elements in general, we wanted that to be a core aspect of the game. I mean, it's funny you mentioned mud, because you got to remember that my first game that I devoted my life to for multiple years was actually not professional at all. It was a Daiku mud. So I kind of grew up as a Daiku mud, well, coder, oddly enough, and administrator, and that's where I learned, basically I learned how to build these games. And in fact, if you look at the kind of first generation of all the people who were running the projects of the first MMOs that came out, it was all mud guys.
Absolutely.
Like Raph and me and Brad and Mark and everybody, we all came out of the mud realm. So to me, what you're hitting at is some of those core elements that I think were awesome. They were like really cool, interesting gameplay elements that just got left on the cutting room floor in the post-WoW era, because they were deemed to be not advantageous to hitting scale. Like if you wanted your game to be approachable to millions of players, you got to sand off all those rough edges, and those were considered rough edges, so they got cut. And so going back and not just bringing them back, but doubling down on them, that was an important. To me, that was an important part of what we wanted to do here. That was an important part.
Yeah, I think EverQuest was EverQuest 1 was the last. Everybody carried around 20 Iron Rats or 20 Feasts or whatever it was, and it didn't provide a buff. It was just so you didn't get the "you're low on food, you're low on water" message, right? I mean, WoW was the first to actually turn it into
Yeah, DayZ has it again, right? I mean, so that's the survival games have got it again. Minecraft has it again.
Yep.
So it was a good mechanic. It just got kind of left behind because once WoW made billions of dollars, that's clearly the way to make MMOs. So if you pitched anything other than that, you weren't going to get funded.
Can we talk some kind of gameplay mechanics around it? Are you going to have to do something like DDO does with camping at shrines to regenerate your abilities, or maybe setting up a camp and sitting by a fire for X amount of minutes?
Yeah, at the core, it's what I call a rubber band mechanic.
Right.
So the goal of the rubber band mechanic is to break up gameplay, so you can't just go on a straight linear campaign and never come back. It's to pull you back to some centralized point every now and then. Death is a rubber band mechanic because of respawn. In the old mud, Rent was a rubber band mechanic, and Hunger and Thirst is kind of a traditional rubber band mechanic as well.
and also in a strategy game. I hate to interrupt you, Adrian, but it creates an interesting point of interest, right? It's another one of our POIs that you need to defend these things wherever whatever your source of the food is.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this kind of perfectly dovetails into the next point of where I want to talk global scale PvP and how the map works and how player behavior emerges because of these POIs and stuff like that. And we might I don't know if you mentioned that these things are POIs. What about maybe you do have a food mechanic, or maybe because there's a lot of people together, you might need special type of things for everybody to rest instead of everybody has their own personal, fire pit that they can pop up. But maybe because you have a large group of people, you have to have special things to put into place to be able to handle a large amount of people on a battlefield. So you add a lot of strategy behind grouping that many people together. Maybe limit the Zergs a little bit so you can spread people out. Are any of those logistical things part of your philosophy?
There's a lot of that stuff that is currently on the table, but I will have to. So eventually we got around to where you said, which was that we're going to say we don't know. So we have an FAQ.
We tried.
I want to say a couple weeks ago, and we were like, this is great. We're going to put this out, and then we got in the revision, and all of a sudden, one question led to another question, and like after a good hour of discussion, we're like, okay, guys, we're not ready on this. We're not ready to talk about this yet, because if we're debating internally and we don't agree on the terms, primarily probably because I change terms constantly, if we can't reach that agreement point, then it's not ready yet for us to go out and present. So that's why we held back on it.
I think
the things you're talking about are exactly the design goals.
The goals of the system, right?
The goals of the system are exactly the pieces you're touching on.
And that's kind of what I want to touch on. And Valor, I want to hand this off to you because I think you have a great perspective with the organization that you help run. with LOTD. Go into some of your concerns or questions or curiosities about large-scale PvP, territory control, and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. You know, what I've seen is that a lot of the organized guilds, it can be the older veteran guilds, or it can be some even the new ones. You know, they figure out pretty quick how to game systems and, you know, make the system work for them. You know, finding the most efficient way to get what they want out of it. And one thing that we saw in a more recent game, Guild Wars 2, where they had caravans, was when the campaign was more or less decided, or at least close enough. They would simply just go around in circles, and because, you know, you would get stuff from capping, you know, their keeps or their resource points, people would just go in a circle and they take it from each other. Do you guys have any thoughts on how you can prevent that from happening, or do you think that the community will police itself in that, because it just didn't happen in Guild Wars 2?
Well, so I'm not generally a believer that the community will police itself. That doesn't. I mean, there are moments of that, and people always trot those out. Like, look, there was this one time where a guild of players got together and they blah blah blah. But realistically, that's not a. This one time is not something I like to bank on. But from what I'm believing, I'm hearing the behavior I think you're saying. I don't think that would work in our system. It just doesn't feel to me like. I mean, I'm not sure what the purpose would be if it's all the other people who aren't going to win have left, and now the main guild is there dragging those resources around. I'm not sure what purpose that would be, because there's limited embargo space anyway.
I mean, again, for us, our caravans all have a purpose. I'm taking something from A to B to make a bigger, better wall, or to put stuff in my embargo so I get more stuff when I leave the campaign. I'm not doing it to generate some type of points, I think is...
Yeah, I mean, I think you've touched on the Bloodstone system,
right.
You know, and, you know, preventing people from, you know, just, you know, setting those up and killing them, and doing that to, you know, garner more points for whatever side.
Yeah, I mean, but it doesn't give you more points outside of I won this campaign. Right. It's not like I can, hey, we've already won this campaign, so let's milk this campaign for more overall points. You won the campaign. That's kind of, it's a Boolean flag. Did you win or did you lose? So you could do that, but it's not really going to buy you anything, which means that nobody would. Yeah. You know, and not because they're trying to be cool to us or something weird like that. The only reason they wouldn't do it is because it doesn't buy them anything. If it's less efficient or less effective, they won't do it. If it's at all efficient or even inefficient, but it's effective, they'll do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the controlling factor, the limiting factor on all of that is the embargo cap, correct?
Right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and, you know, kind of segueing off of that, you know, when guilds are going through and they're owning, you know, they're setting up their keeps, they're owning the mines, or, you know, their territory control, do you have any plans to have any, you know, actual in-game identifiers for influence of what a guild has on a map currently, or is that all just
to do that? We haven't specifically sat down and gone through it, but that, you know, we need to do it. It was cool in Shadowbane, even though the maps were a mess. Like, if you go look up Shadowbane strategy map on Google Images, and you'll see what I mean by it's a mess. We'll need to do it though, because it is. I mean, it's effectively agree, right? Yeah. You know, seeing those guild crests and the size of them relates to the amount of territory was really, really cool.
I'm good with heads on spikes. You know, I mean, whatever you guys want to do.
Yeah, I'm with you.
You know, and another thing I think that. Actually, you covered a lot of the questions that I had about the campaigns. Like, did you have some more questions about the combat that you wanted to get into?
Well,
go ahead.
No, the one thing about resources that I wanted to bring up is, you know, it's kind of more of a black market type of question.
Oh, yeah.
What happens if, you know, you have these big guilds and they're preparing for a campaign, maybe a tournament where the win really matters for the year? What prevents them from gathering a whole bunch of money, paying a whole bunch of normal people to stack up all of their resources together, even if it's like an 80% hit for the import restrictions, and just pay a lot of money to people and get a giant leg up? Is that something you might want to prevent, or you don't care about?
Yeah, we're going to have to talk about the tournament rules. I mean, we may decide that the right thing to do with the tournaments is to go terminate a rule set. Right. Again, tournaments is not an area that is fully designed.
Well, forget about tournaments. What about just a normal campaign?
But I mean, that seems to me an area that we would probably want to say, okay, look, we need everybody to come in on an equal footing. I mean, I don't know. We're going to have to talk about it.
Yeah, and the import rules and export rules are just going to be a huge balance point in the beginning, right? I mean, we're going to see what happens in the first couple campaigns. We're going to see this in beta. Oh, this is what they're doing. And then we'll make the appropriate adjustments. I mean, it's just... We actually have to see it in motion.
Well,
first,
the main point I had with that is the fact that guilds are buying up resources with real life money and then using that to pile up an advantage. Is that something you would want to prevent, or you don't care about?
Well, no. I mean, if they have the Terminator rules, meaning they can bring nothing into the campaigns with them, then that.
What if it's not a non-Terminator campaign? I mean, the whole focus is balancing between using real life money to pay for resources. Whether it's not a Terminator campaign, maybe it's just a normal campaign with 30% import restrictions, or whatever.
They're still limited, but the key is that on those campaigns, everyone is limited to the same degree. So. So if I go into a campaign that it says it's relaxed import rules, and everybody else I know is coming into those campaigns as well, the fact that Tully might have bought his gun to bring it to the gun fight, and I earned my gun and brought it to the gun fight, we're still both starting with a gun. Now, if I just don't like that, if it offends me, so don't join that campaign. I mean, that's the thing. I find that. That's kind of, I always use the analogy, back to my analogies, I always use the analogy
Here comes another one.
Is like, a restaurant that I don't like because I don't like their type of food. In fact, I don't even go to that city because I think the city sucks, but I'm really pissed off because they don't serve the beer that I like. Now I've entered the realm now of philosophical debate. Because it doesn't actually affect me at all. I'm not going to go there. I don't really care. I'm just trolling outside the restaurant, picketing, telling everybody that they suck because they don't serve the beer that I like in the restaurant I won't eat in. And I'd say, okay, yeah, there definitely is a level of philosophical debate there, but I don't really have time for that, and I can't win anyway, so I'm just going to go eat somewhere else.
All right.
So I think the other thing you should, you're worried about this stuff. I would worry more about a Don King boxing match. I'm worried about one guild trying to pay off the people they're fighting against.
Yeah, okay, that's true. That's possible.
Right. This is amusing. I'm in between restaurants and beer and Don King.
Yeah.
I think we covered the gambit on that one.
It's irrelevant, right? If one guild was going to pay somebody to take it on the chin, they could do that with having nothing to do with us. In fact, I'm pretty sure we would say that's against the terms of service, and if they decide to do it, they'll just go around and do it without us. So I don't know. There's some level to which we will just do it always falls back to CS, right? There is always a level that you're like, well, and in that case, we're just going to have to get somebody involved because there's no automated
the system can't
design,
pick up that's going on.
I mean, that could happen technically in the NFL, right?
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Refs there, and there's rules against it, and they'll step in, but...
Have you guys considered that another strategy to handle that is just making resources that much more scarce? It help prevent guilds from being able to stockpile a lot to be able to pay off and afford to be able to pay off other guilds.
Well, we're still guessing that people are going to be dumping those things into their guild EK on some form. Okay. Right? In the beginning, you're just going to want to funnel all those materials you're pulling out right back into your EK.
Well, I'd like to move on to combat because I think, Todd, in our first interview about 30 days ago, you said that it was more of a job for somebody else. And I want to kind of talk about... I don't want to talk about the specifics of combat because I know it's not even designed yet, and you're still working on it and be tweaking it for the next year and a half or so, or 3 years, or who knows. But the combat, there's a couple points that we can discuss, and there's a big points on the forums. There's animation lock, there's weight, there's physics, there's the ability to tie all that in with your engine and your network code, and then there's all sorts of things about counterplay and rotation. And before we get into some specific points, and I think Lake really wants to bring up, can you talk about your philosophy of how you want your combat to feel and why you want it to feel that way?
Yeah, why don't you take that one?
Yeah. So my previous game was DC Universe Online. I mean, I imagine many of you played it, right?
Excellent combat.
Yeah, and everybody loved the combat in that game. And the funny thing about that is it took us probably 3 years to get to that point, and our end point was right where we started. It's just when we started, it didn't have the flashiness, it didn't have a lot of the visual elements that came on later. So it'll be interesting to evaluate how we get to that stage with where we're at right now. Right? We look at it, it's like, it looks kind of like MMO stuff. I don't like the projected textures, and I can say we'll get there. The thing that drove us there was Todd's like, this just isn't good looking enough, right? Mm-hmm. The split torso in this day and age. I mean, a lot of us got used to it playing WoW and stuff like that.
It's just not good.
It sucks.
It feels,
I don't like the way it looks.
Yeah, it's terrible. It feels smooth, but if you actually looked at what the character is doing, right? I'm sliding this way with my feet are fixed, and I'm doing this, and it looks like I'm fighting in a rapid fire mech, which is a lot of fun for a lot of people.
And that's why MMOs are boring to watch, because typically it just looks like a mess. And the reason why games like League of Legends is huge, because characters have distinct moves, and like you're doing with archetypes, they have a set race and thing. You know what's going to happen. You know that Jarvan 4 is going to go in and do his move, and you know it's going to happen every single time, and you love watching it because you know what's coming.
Cool. Yeah, it's specifically polished to look great, and to feel great.
Yeah, and when you watch it, you generally know like those heroes' moves, right? So you can predict, oh, he totally should have done that, right? And it's much more difficult when you have 30 or 40 abilities, and their logic tree just goes in any direction. But I think a lot of the things that we're trying, such as physics, will eliminate. I keep hearing the word Zerg all the time, right? And there's a lot of things that we're just doing that will prevent a lot of those mechanics, not allowing 50 people to stand on one spot, right? Just because our players have capsules and you can't push through them, right? So a lot of these little things that we're trying, we're very aware of what things work, and we're trying to go that route.
Yeah, I have an interesting comment about the physics, because it does have some weird implications I didn't think of. Like the first time we got in and got those Hellcats in, right? Yep. I spawned a dozen of them, ran up, and they came up and they circled around me. And I went to the coders, like, hey, who did the swarming mechanic? Because that's a task, right? It's on the backlog. Swarming mechanic. Make the creatures naturally form a circle around you so they look for an opening so it looks better than your normal MMO. And they were like, nobody worked on that. They couldn't get to you.
That's the physics.
So they had to swarm around you in a circle, because otherwise it can attack you.
Right.
So
cool.
it didn't even occur to me. So I was able to take that off the wall, rip it up.
Right, yeah. It's a lot of little things that fall out of that we're going for.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you guys actually talked about it, and you talked about how it's a little harder to have, figure out what skills are going to happen, and you talked about skill caps and having 30 skills. Do you guys have a plan on kind of limiting the amount of skills that someone can bring on their bars?
Well, we have a bunch of cards on the wall that you can't see over there that kind of has powers mapped out, so I can kind of look at those and go, yeah, that's probably going to work. Some of the things we're going to try is, I saw Dragon brought this up last night, was League of Legends has probably 6 powers, right? But if you think about it, their powers are kind of compound powers. Like if you compare it to an old MMO, if you were to break those into their constituent pieces, it's probably more than that, because they do a lot of things, right? They have a lot of passives running on the characters. So that's kind of the next level, and you saw a lot of that with the DCUO combat, was our powers did a lot of things, and they had branching logic within them. If I'm on fire, this power does a different thing than when I'm not on fire. Right. If I'm in control mode, my powers are passively generating power for my group every time I fire ability. When he swaps into DPS mode, it stops doing those things. So we make very complicated powers now that do a lot of those things that it used to take 40 to 60 powers to encompass.
Okay, so you plan on having just not a completely limited bar, but some kind of skill cap to where you have these functioning skills that work together.
We also have some, we're talking about some branching combos too, because I think they add a lot to it, because you have a decision choice. Do I go to this ability, do I sacrifice it for this ability? This one's going to be slightly better if I use this one before that one. And we can bury some of those. If you've played Terra a little and you see hit the space bar to do a combo, right? You can bury a lot of abilities deep in that you can only get to by hitting the first one, right? So it creates this interesting point where, do I go on to ability 3 in this combo, or, oh, hey, the cooldown on this one came up, do I go over to that one now?
And I love talking to you, because obviously this is your realm, and I love combat. So, real quick, last night we were talking, and I was talking about cancel casting and being able to stop a cast or some kind of animation lock. What's your take on animation locks and being able to cancel cast some of those abilities to be able to counterplay your opponent?
Well, I mean, it's absolutely critical for, like, if you look at the knight who's got an active block mechanic. If he sees a big hammer coming his way, but he's locked into a 1.5 anim, he's got to get a way to get out of that, right? Otherwise, he's just going to get hit in the head, right? So if he hits a block and it instantly knocks him out of the ability he was playing then, he lost the time that he was already spending to get to that power, but he saved himself getting hit in the head by a big hammer.
So the limiting factor of being able to consistently do that is going to be a cooldown-based system, a mana-based system?
Blocking will probably have some type of another bar, a stamina bar, or something like that. So, because we had this problem on DC in the beginning when we first put blocking in, was everybody was just sitting blocking.
Right.
It was a big game of chicken. Who's going to break out a block, right? So we put block breakers in to counter that, right? So now if you got caught in a block, you felt the pain, right? I mean, you didn't want to get caught in a block.
Right, because no one wants the Roman soldier tactic where everyone's in the block position, blocking everything coming forward.
Right. Certain archetypes will only have block.
Okay.
Right?
Now, when you talk about your different combat aspects, and you're talking about, I've seen you reference WildStar a lot. I don't really consider WildStar a very action-based combat system. They were, they had the 2-axis animations where they had, the bottom and the top, and they had a lot of dashing, which gave it the action feel to it. But to me, it was more of a classic hotbar combat system. But you just had a point in the right direction. It was very, it was very forgiving as for action-based. Would you consider, instead of using WildStar in your comparison, it's more of a combination of DCUO and Terra instead?
Well, so WildStar was the end of the. I think it's the evolution of the WoW model.
Yep.
Right. It was very pretty. I mean, their animations are beautiful. I love moving around in that game. It's a lot of fun. Just to double jump. I mean, that experience is great. But we tried that and we decided we just couldn't make it look as good as we wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I don't. It doesn't have the cinematic feeling of combat that I want. Yeah. So yes, double jumping and running around and stuff like that. It works well for movement, but for the actual combat mechanic itself, I didn't like it. And we were just running in circles.
Yep.
Running in circles.
And I'm sure we got a bad analogy out of that one too. But, we took that back to the boards, and again, I was when I initially started talking combat with the team. I mean, I came from DCO, right? I mean, that was the last big combat system that I did. It didn't do very well on the PC, right? I mean, we have to be honest here. Same with Terra. Terra did not do well in North America, right? So you kind of go, hey, we're going to make this big bet. Let's play this one safe, but it comes with warts if we do that, right?
Well, I mean, I could tell you. I mean, I'm all across the internet in a lot of different communities. I think people are going to hate me and going to tweet me and write emails to me, but I think a lot of people agree with me. Terra had some of the best combat in the MMO market to date, but the game around it was boring. It was just a grind of kill 10 rats, for 30 to 80 hours or whatever, and had terrible crafting, and there was no game around it. But it was fun to play, which is why I actually survived halfway to level cap, because I actually enjoyed killing mobs over and over again, because it was fun to do combos and big flashy things.
It's
and all that
absolutely
other stuff.
fun to do those combos, but you had to grind over that level 10 to 15 hill. Like if you start out as a Slayer Berserker and you get one big move,
oh, it was awful.
It's just you need to get to the fun, which is the problem, which is, again, one of the other philosophies I have is, if we're going to start you with combos, let's give you a good chunk of your kit right off the bat.
Yep. No,
right? No doubt. So you have stuff to play with.
And I think I bet, and this maybe Lakes can back me up on this just by his experience, because he has very minimal experience with Terra. I think you mentioned, and I think everybody that said they hate animation lock and they hated Terra's combat probably picked that Slayer or that Berserker as their class that they played, and that's really what the. So I would suggest everybody out there go download Terra. It's free to play. Play some of the other classes, because even at that level 1 mark, some of the other classes are actually pretty mobile and
play the
warrior. I play the warrior quite a bit.
And the warrior doesn't even really open up till about 30 when he gets. The thing with the animation lock is what they smartly did was they broke their anim locks into about 1.5 second to 2 second anims. Right? They didn't go with any 6 to 10 second anims. Mm-hmm. And then what you do is you chain together a series of 4 of these 1.5 to 2 second animations. So at any point in there, you have a natural breakout, right? If you're like, I don't like the way this thing is doing, it also lets you reposition. Because one of the things that you naturally will notice that you're just doing automatically is, because you always launch an attack in the direction of your crosshairs, is you're repositioning your crosshair as you're fighting. So if your target is shifting this way and this move is ending straight ahead of me, I've already moved my camera. When I initiate the next ability in the combo, I'm shifting that way already.
Like, did you have a final point?
I actually had a question, because we talked about WildStar quite a bit, and then Terra. We have a good mix of different kinds of combat there, and they have similarities. But one of the things that WildStar had was those telegraphs and friendly fire. Those are two big things that I think are going to be big on the game. First of all, friendly fire. We haven't had that in a long time. Second is friendly fire on top of having telegraphs. What's your overall concept or design mechanic involved with the telegraphs, and is it just going to be a bunch of blobs all over the ground?
It's now about the mess on the ground, right?
We don't know if telegraphs are going to make the cut or not, to be honest. And the friendly fire rules, that really depends on
Right.
the rule set that you're in, which band you're in. Because, in the faction-based rules, it probably won't be very common. In the dregs, it'll probably be incredibly common.
But in a world where a lot of projectiles are firing straight out, right, it may have to mean that there's more lobbing style to arc over that front line, right? If you want to kind of stay behind your knights there, you're not going to want to hit them in the back of the head with a fireball, right? You're going to feel pretty ineffectual as a caster if everything that you do is shoot a projectile straight in front of you,
Right.
You're going to need some lobbing stuff. You're going to need a way to get through them. In the Ganetian case, get underneath them.
That's cool.
And I think.
So that's
Oh, I'm just saying, just
Sorry.
to counter on that point, I think the biggest part about Terra Combat that I really liked is the telegraph of the animation. That's what you really watch for. Instead of paying attention, staring down at the ground the whole time, you're like, okay, I see green, I see red. You're watching for that animation.
Right,
to
but
pop.
the thing they had to do to make that work, Dragon, was the red flash, and they had to make the mobs really big. Right?
Sure.
So if you fight another humanoid-sized target or another player in PvP, you'll notice that you have to learn the moves more of what their animations are doing. On the big-ass mobs, you needed to see that red flash, oh, he's enraged, to know, get the hell
coming.
out of the way, he's about to do something. So there's some subtle changes, and we don't want to make really big, giant players running around the game.
So one last thing, we were talking about combat, and one of the things that people, they love combat, but they also love stats involved with combat. And we talked about, and you guys have released about statistics and alloys. What does that mean?
You mean on the crafting stuff?
On the crafting and how that is going to relate to the gear. We have stuff that gives you attributes.
Sure, yep.
And we have statistics that come from different crafting. So can you give us a little example of stuff that may be different from your game relative to other games?
Well, I mean, the entire idea of, hey, you're going to make a helmet, and I just give you one helmet. I know every one of you has played a crafting system where you've had 15 to 20 different helmet recipes in your book, and you just ignore all the junk ones just to get to the one most current one, right? We're saying we give you a helmet recipe, and you determine what metal goes in there. And if it's really important for you, let's say you're not a centaur, but you want to have the movement speed that they do, maybe you skew your gear towards having a little extra movement speed on it. So we give you kind of these valves to kind of go for the stats.
So
that you really
there's lots of different stats. I think that's like...
Yeah, if you look at the alloy chart, I think we hit like 5, but that's just alloys. If you look at leather and the cloth requirements of a helmet, you have another, let's just say 3 pieces now, because we haven't balanced the whole thing. Right, you might have 9 different little substats on there.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
right?
so yeah, that's the min-max part of everything was all these different small things.
The min-maxers and the crafters will go nuts. The combatants will tell them what they're looking for, which will kind of steer the market towards who makes that kind of stuff.
Okay, great. Lakes, did you have anything else? I know you wanted to talk about, we're running a little low on time. Is there any parts of, I skipped over like the item section. Is there anything you wanted to hit up on that before we move on?
Just real quick, some of the mechanics and the micro involved in combat, it seems like you guys have a great system in place, but as far as micro and that cancel casting, another thing that goes along with that is being able to weapon swap. Do you guys have any plans of being able to have multiple different weapons where you'll swap and then be able to use a different skill bar or a different set of skills, maybe a few, or be able to put on a shield if you're a range carry and you're getting attacked by somebody to be able to negate some of that damage coming in?
So that's kind of, usually weapon swap systems are put in to kind of avoid scenarios that players find unfortunate, right? Like, oh, hey, shields are ridiculous, so we want a weapon swap to the shield when we see that big-ass fireball coming in, right? Our archetypes are limited to a kind of classification of weapon, so you're not going to see the champion equipping a shield, right? Because look to Terra for this as an example, right? Their characters all use very specific weapons, right? The warrior uses two-handed swords exclusively. The slayer uses that big-ass weapon. Our knights are going to use a sword and shield because all of their animations are sword and shield.
There's discipline crossovers.
There is some discipline crossover.
So if they want to do two-handed sword, they can take a Blade Master discipline, and that gives them access to that. They don't have access to everything because not every character has every single animation.
Because we don't build animations for every single character.
But we did make sure that they have enough, and everybody has, you know, the kind of standard one-handed. Like, that's a baseline. Nobody's going to be in a position where they can't just pick up a sword or pick up a dagger or whatever and use it.
But we really don't see you swapping to the shield to avoid the fireball, or, oh, hey, because two-handers do big damage right before I do my big move, I really equip. I use a hot button to switch that out,
Right.
move, and then switch back to my regular weapon.
Yeah.
That's how you usually see the application of those systems.
Yeah, we did put in the earliest test. We did put in swapping between your ranged weapon and your sword, right? And
Yeah.
I think you can actually see it probably in some of the videos. Is the knight pops that shield on his back and pulls out his bow,
but it swaps your entire
his bar.
Right, it
And
swaps
then
all your abilities out too.
We kind of broke the bar into two parts too, because there was also the discipline swapping that you could do as well. So you could swap the first half of your bar with the second half. But again, this is all like very much still.
That's very minutia level at this point.
Yeah, we're poking the bread while it's still in the oven. Analogy.
Yeah, I think we have some goals. We've built a lot of these things before, and we're kind of driving towards those. And then in the first alpha, we'll see what you guys think, and
kind of go
we'll
from there, right? Well,
Awesome.
I want to talk a little bit about archetypes and how they kind of work with how you're developing and moving them on. Right now, you announced the Minotaur Myrmidon. Awesome.
Oh yeah,
Badass.
I'm looking at his card on the wall right now. If your camera was just rotated a little bit,
You could pick it up.
see the entire wall.
Just pick it up a little bit.
Here, just show us quick.
But
Make sure you get those Post-it notes too.
the one important thing I think I want to bring up, and maybe it's going to be a simple answer, but I think it needs to be spoken, is I've been playing the game for 6 months now. It's live. You guys say you have all these great ideas for these different archetypes and stuff like that, and you constantly want to be adding them in there. What about a player that finds a new one that he really likes? Is there going to any way he could play a catch up, or he's doomed to start all the way from the scratch and be kind of that noob again?
I think one of the cool things that we're building into the skill system is that concept of early base usage, right? And right now, I think we've said 10 to 20% is what we're thinking.
Yeah, 20% was a lot.
If we find over time we need to dial that up a little bit,
Okay.
maybe 30%, right? We have a valve, we have a way to accommodate people who come in that late.
Okay, so there's going to be some kind of catch-up mechanism, possibly.
The way we talked about was basically giving you an ability to quickly gain the first 20%, 30%, whatever that number is, of skills, and then beyond that, now it's passive. That way you can kind of get up quickly and try things out.
Right, but they're more concerned about the people who come in 1 year later.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that and the guy that's been playing for a year, that he has all these long-term passive skills that he trained out, somewhat similar to Eve, and then all of a sudden you're starting a new character and you don't have access to those anymore. So, I mean, that's the other type of question. Another thing is, we're adding archetypes. Are you taking it more of like a MOBA approach, where you might be monetizing additional archetypes that are coming out, like buy one for $3 or something like that?
No, we won't be selling them. We did with the Minotaur. We gave an early, like basically you get 1 month early ability to create a character. What's funny is that's actually not a MOBA trick. That's a Shadowbane trick. Back when we did Shadowbane, we took 3 of our characters, with the Minotaur, the Centaur, and the Iroquois, and you only had access to those if you bought the pre-order box. And then they basically unlocked for everyone else at month 1, month 2, and month 3. So I was like, oh, you know what? That idea I think Tully brought it up. I was like, that's actually a pretty cool idea, because it's not giving anybody an inherent advantage. The characters are balanced. It just means they get access to them faster.
Whatever.
So,
Okay.
Yeah. So we might do that again in the future, but we aren't going to be selling them. We've talked about skins also, like, can I get my knight and make him look more like a Queen's Guard or whatever, and that's a possibility, but those would be purely cosmetic.
Sure.
So
Now, what about how many archetypes are too many?
I don't know.
Wow. So
About 100.
I think the cool thing with our archetypes is, because we didn't choose to do the homogeneous, hey, every class can play every race, where you end up building humans and elves and dwarves, and then everybody plays a variant of that. We went across the board. We've got Centaur, we've got Fae, and the way we have it set up, we're going to get the Ganeshans. We're going to get a lot of cool archetypes that you won't see, because we don't have to build every single animation for every single race.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that's what I think people probably haven't gotten is the downside of saying, hey, we're not going to have that much depth, right? We can't have every single combination of every race with every class. It means that we can spend that resource on width instead, right? We can have much more unique characters, and a lot more unique characters that look great. If you go for the depth, then what you're basically doing is that early decision has a ripple effect. That means that now to extend any additional classes, your cost is so high
Tons of
that by
balance and
definition
design.
you just can't do that many of them. Especially a small game like us. Right? I mean, we're not trying to make a WoW competitor. We don't have that kind of money.
No,
so.
sure.
we thought this was the right approach.
Lakes, did you have anything to add about archetypes that you wanted to throw out there?
Just, did you guys have any kind of archetypes that may pick up more of like a disruption type of role, whether it may be interrupt the opposing caster or the opposing enemy, or some sort of control lock mobility type archetype?
Again, we're going to get to those nuances when we start actually build. You know what I mean? That's kind of
right.
a. Yeah, you'll be able to knock someone on the ground and stop them from casting. I mean, but I don't know if there's going to be a role centered around that. Again, that's kind of a. We'll get to that one when we.
Yeah, we've got this wall, the mythical wall that you guys probably want to see. But if we turned around the camera, somebody would screenshot it, and now all of that would be.
All developers have a mystical wall.
And
Canon.
Yeah, it would be. But it's got just basically sticky notes and little push pins and stickers all over it. So it's constantly in flux right now. Like just tonight, I went up and I said, "Hey, do we have this combination?" And Blair was like, "Actually, we don't." And I was like, "All right, well, we need to figure that one out. That seems like an obvious one. That these two roles combined is going to be something that's popular and people are going to want." So, so that's going to be heavily modified here. I mean, that's of course.
Yeah, I know we're getting short on time, and I think I want to wrap it up and leave it with Valor. He's got a couple player questions from the community that I think he wanted to throw out there. So, Valor, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the big ones is the embargo, the embargo vault. People really want to know how is it going to work when you're exporting. I think that I touched on it last night. I don't know if you were there for that, Thomas, but for me. If you have a random chance for for what you take out, I feel like that is approaching surgery with a hammer, and there's my analogy.
So let me just stop because we're short on time. Let me go ahead and stop you. I already replied to this on the forums once. I was like, yeah, you know what? Random is actually pretty shitty. We can come up with something better than that, but honestly, something better. Let's get back to you. That's the last time I've actually.
We'll hold you to that.
So I can think of off the top of my head half a dozen ways that we could do it that would be better than random. We'll come up with something better. I didn't. It was one of those things that was like, we'll just figure this out. So
yeah.
All right, you got another one there for Valor?
I think that that was really the big one. So.
Cool. All right, let's wrap this up. This is Crowns and Crows. The dev team's got a long night ahead of them. Right now, as we're sitting, we'll give some stats. We're at 1,629,000, 16,233 backers. I think before you guys went on the previous podcast, you've raised another $20,000. I think.
Oh well, let's keep going then. Let's keep going.
Hey, we take credit for every dollar spent during our live stream every week. This is all because of us. You're welcome.
I know you're like what 16th biggest funded.
15. They made 15.
So congratulations, guys.
We broke the top 15. It's amazing. So thank you guys, by the way, for helping us get the word out and helping people. We get skeptics all the time. We knew that going into it. People have great reason to be skeptical. So the fact that in spite of that, people have been willing to jump up and put a vote of confidence in us and say, hey, this is a vision worth pursuing is incredibly flattering and awesome. So thank you so much for that.
And Gordon, I apologize. I didn't have enough time to go to you with some of your responses about post-Kickstarter offerings. I know that was a big hot topic on today's forums, that you're going over different alternatives and stuff like that. Is there anything else you want to say before we drop off, or just say go read the forums and everything's out there?
We also answered some good stuff on the AMA or on the Reddit AMA earlier, so you might check that out as well, because there were a couple things that came up. I was like, oh, that's a really good question. We've never talked about that before. So.
Yeah, there were several things that were brand new.
Okay, so we'll leave it to investigate that. Again, guys, thank you very much. Everybody else have a great night. Follow us on Twitter, @CrownsandCrows. Dragon, Valor, Lakes, the Crowfall team, we appreciate it. Guys, have a very good night. Take care.
Thank you. See you guys.
Thanks.
See you guys. Appreciate it.